This is a Reader's Digest version containing many of the interesting parts of the flat Earth theory. For those who have already started seeing things with new eyes, it will be mostly a recap, but there could be a few new angles you haven't looked at. For the rest of you who are new to this, the first question is invariably, is this a joke? Because it's a joke, right? And that's where we start, because it's one of our two basic childhood facts. 1 + 1 = 2, and the Earth is a globe. We're taught this before almost everything else. And that right there should give you a clue on how serious this secret is.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm not fully on board with flat Earth yet.
That's a hard one.
It is a hard one.
I was violently opposed to it. I was mad at people that would bring it up.
Right.
And that's normal. Everybody that's into flat Earth, it was very hard for them to get into it and admit it. It took like 1.5 years for them to admit it.
Flat Earth has long been touted as the mother of all conspiracy theories, marginalized, suppressed, and ridiculed for centuries as being an ignorant, ancient, unscientific worldview. But the facts of the matter are far from what you've been told. It is a fact, not a theory, that bodies of water always seek and find their own level, from a beaker, a bottle, or a bathtub, to a pond, lake, or an ocean. The natural physics of water and other liquids is to find and remain level. It is an unproven, unscientific theory with no observable, measurable, or repeatable evidence to claim that bodies of water can somehow bend, cling to the exterior of shapes, and show convexity upon their surface.
For the first 4,000 years of our civilization, we believed that the Earth was a flattish disk, surrounded by a solid dome barrier called the firmament. All of the 5 major religions had their own version of this, and the churches enforced the belief. Then, around 1514, a man named Copernicus created a new model of the world. He stated that if the Earth was spinning around 1,100 miles an hour and circling the sun at 60,000 miles an hour, the world was then round. And while the math more or less worked, there was a problem. It was 1500, and the technology to prove such a theory wasn't there. The first balloon to carry people wasn't invented until 1760. Sailboats were the only travel over water, and the fastest thing on land was a horse. But the new worldview was promoted and took hold. The religions adapted to handle the new reality, and life moved on.
I've got to think this is not very organized.
No, what I'm saying is
I got to think I couldn't have it all wrong. There's no way.
Anybody that thinks the Earth is flat, they totally don't believe what we're taught about what's above us. So when
the
people
sun?
say space
Wait a
is
minute.
fake,
What about the sun?
They mean all the information we're getting. You're lying about that shit. It's not that it doesn't exist. Of course it exists. We see
Right,
it.
of course.
But space is fake sounds ridiculous. Like
There's something
we're
up
looking
there.
at it and it's fake. That's ridiculous. That's
just
not what
the
it means. It
Truman
means
Show.
that all the information we got about all
We're
those
off.
lights in the sky.
Yeah. Something else?
They're lying
NASA's
to
lying?
us. They're lying to us.
Why would NASA lie?
And there's a reason,
well,
and
why
I can sit
wouldn't
here
they,
and tell you,
Brian?
but you guys don't want to hear it.
Part of a series of clues that can help you get your head around both the design of the flat Earth system we live in and who has been involved in the deception to hide it from you. This clue covers the near-perfect design of the flat Earth model and will break down some of the logic behind the decisions made. It sounds like a big task, and it is. But to start, let's look at something small, like this little guy. Take an ordinary mouse and put it into a glass cage. It doesn't have to be a mouse. It could be a snake, a lizard, an insect. It makes little difference for this exercise. People identify with mice because they're used to seeing them in lab experiments. Mice also don't have any sinister connotations. They're seen as relatively innocent and benign, the perfect test subject, as it were. I have yet to meet anyone who has a bias against the lab mouse. So the mouse goes into the box for the first time, and the reaction is always the same. It explores its surroundings, and more importantly, tests the barrier around it, probing for exits or potential exits. The mouse inspects every inch of its new glass home, and at some point, settles into the acceptance that the walls are indeed solid, and that it may be there for a while. Every so often, it will repeat the process, again checking the boundaries of the cage, just in case something has changed. What it doesn't do is act like it would in the wild, because it realizes that it's in a form of captivity. The glass box doesn't even remotely resemble its natural environment. You could put this box in the middle of a forest, and the mouse may feel slightly better about its situation, but it still knows that it's been trapped against its will. and will settle into a non-native lifestyle. You could take all the other small animals that could be substituted for a mouse, the snake, the lizard, the insect. It makes no difference. The result will invariably be the same. Repeated probing for escape routes, then acceptance. Take the same animal and now put it into the middle of a 100-mile square wildlife preserve, surrounded on all sides by a similar type of glass enclosure. The creature doesn't even bother to rush the size of the preserve and start testing the boundaries, mostly because it's out of visual range. It could be days or even weeks before it even encounters a single fence. The animal's routine is spent doing what it normally would do. It eats, it sleeps, it breeds. It does everything that it would naturally do in the wild. If one day the animal approaches the fence, there might be some curiosity, but any anxiety is quickly resolved by just turning around and heading back into the vast expanse from which it came. The fence does not pose a potential problem for the animals in the preserve because it is so small compared to the expanse they live in, and dwelling on it doesn't hold any interest. We're assuming here that the fence is high enough to discourage flying creatures as well, deep enough to stop burrowing classes, and if you want, reaches the floor of any nearby bodies of water, stopping any clever aquatic types. The point here is that all creatures great and small inside a giant wildlife preserve, when countering the fence, wouldn't care. They would all in their own way just shrug and move on with their lives. However, if you take a human, male or female, regardless of education or nurturing, and put them in the exact same wildlife sanctuary, the response would be quite different. When the human approaches the glass fence, they don't see it as a minor distraction. They pause, they wonder, and more importantly, they ask questions, either internally or amongst others. Why is the fence here? How far does it reach? Can I dig underneath, or climb over, or go around it? These questions continue in a way you might imagine, but eventually a bigger question jumps to the top of the list. Who built the fence? It is that which changes not only the type of questions being asked, but how the human being, or beings, look at their world.
It is a fact, not a theory, that the horizon always appears perfectly flat 360 degrees around the observer, regardless of altitude. All amateur balloon, rocket, plane, and drone footage show a completely flat horizon as high as we can reach, over 20 miles, or 120,000 feet up. The only time the horizon ever bends is when viewed through a fisheye lens or a curved commercial airplane window. It is also a fact that the horizon always rises to the eye level of the observer as altitude is gained, so you never have to look down to see it. If the Earth were in fact a globe, no matter how large, as you ascended, the horizon would stay fixed, and the observer would have to tilt, looking down further and further to see it. It is a fact, not a theory, that we are able to observe objects at incredibly long distances, far beyond what would be possible if Earth were a globe 25,000 miles in circumference, as we're told. For example, it is a fact that in Genoa, Italy, from just above sea level, on clear days, it is possible to see the distant islands of Elba, Gorgona, Caprea, and Corsica, 80 to 125 miles away. It is a necessary theory that the globe Earth must curve 8 inches per mile squared if it really be a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, as we're told. But based on such a theory, these islands would all be completely hidden behind thousands of feet of curved Earth. In fact, the record-breaking longest distance zoom photograph ever taken recently showed Pic Gaspard from Pic de Finestrelles, a whopping 275 miles away, at a height of under 10,000 feet, where, based on correct curvature calculations, the entire mountain should be invisible behind several miles of curved Earth. It is an observable, testable, repeatable, scientific fact of reality that Polaris, the North Pole star, situated perfectly over the North Pole center of Earth, never moves a single inch, night after night, year after year, century after century, with all the other fixed stars remaining fixed in their relative constellations, revolving perfect circles around Polaris.
Okay, so you got your map, and you got the world, and you're acting out this map, and hopefully the match between your map and the world is such that the map matches the world. And if it doesn't, you get an anomaly. And then the anomaly can be of different sizes, proportionate to the hierarchy, and then your emotional response is proportionate to where the anomaly seems to rest in the hierarchy as well, subject to your own neuroticism, say, and your own competence, which we can think of as somewhat separate phenomena. Okay, so then you can say, the reason that people don't like other people who are foreigners, say, or different ethnicity, or who have different belief systems, is because they appear to challenge the integrity of that map. And so, because their belief systems and the way they act, first of all, aren't very well mapped by the map, so you don't know what the hell those people are up to, you know, and the differences may be much smaller than you think, but what do you know? You don't know. Plus, if their belief systems come with them, which they will, that has an indeterminate effect on the structure, the map, and it also has an indeterminate effect on your position within the map. And so then those theories, and part of that is the theory that I developed in the book called Maps of Meaning, that theory proposes, at least in part, that the reason that people cling to their belief systems the way they do is because if their belief systems are disrupted at a high level, low resolution level, just at the level of action, or way the hell up the hierarchy in terms of the definition of the good or what constitutes a redeemed person or something like that, then that brings out tremendous disruption. And then you'd expect two phenomena from that. You'd expect that people would be afraid, say, of foreigners or of strange ideas, but also that they'd be kind of interested in them. And I think generally our interactions with people who aren't like us, generally, or we think aren't like us, whatever, take place at a level where it's more curiosity than fear. I mean, that would be almost the definition of a sustainable, tolerant society, right? Everything around you is functioning well enough so that if someone comes along who's different in belief or action, you're not gonna assume they're a fatal threat to the integrity of your hierarchy and fall apart because of terror and curiosity.